Just wanted to say a few words ahead of this video because these videos come off the back of a huge lot of Eaglemoss Star Trek ships that I picked up recently, and so I've put up all the duplicates on eBay for you to have a look at, and I'll include links around and about the place. So if you've got any sort of interest in getting hold of a few of these to have a look at them for yourself, you can do so for a while at least, because it looks like they're not going to go flying off the shelves. I've tried to price them quite reasonably, so do please go and have a look, and without further ado, I will get on with the main video. Cheers. So this is an interesting model, this one, because this is a deeply obscure little ship, and yet it is a very important little ship from Star Trek Voyager. And if you're unfamiliar, the Voyager crew pick up a Borg drone called 7 of 9, but her name is actually Hansen, and she's human. And of course, in theory, there shouldn't be that many humans knocking around in the Borg collective until after possibly Wolf 359, arguably. So how she actually came to be assimilated was always this kind of slightly open question. But basically, we're introduced to this ship called the Raven. Now, it's called the USS Raven, but it's actually NAR-32450. Now, that's unusual because it isn't an NCC. So, what we learned from actually in this magazine is that this was a scientific exploration vessel, and it's got some Danube class runabout looks and feels to it, but it's a little bit bigger than a runabout, I think, overall. But it's definitely got that sort of sense to it. Reminds me a little bit of the Janolan, actually, as well, that they introduced in the Next Generation. But basically, it's intended to be a very long-range exploration vessel. So as long as it can find dilithium, it can refuel itself and keep going. But the idea behind this was that 7 of 9's parents, the Hansens, Magnus and Erin, were going to investigate rumours of a cybernetic race. This was in 2353. So they managed to get hold. They and their daughter Annika. So why you take your daughter on a long-range exploration missile mission into space with you, I don't know, but they chose to. So it was a family vessel. The text theory is that they would have sort of been assigned this vessel. Maybe it was kind of sold off as surplus. We know that there are junkyards in the Next Generation. They're mentioned a few times. So older Federation vessels do end up being put out to pasture. So I think basically a science wing got hold of this one and assigned it to the Hansens. And we only see it in the episode The Raven as a sort of crumpled heap like this, because it's crashed, it's been partially assimilated, or largely assimilated. Now, that's one of the questions I have about the Raven, I suppose, is that if it was assimilated at all, surely it would still be flying. I'm not presuming it ran into some sort of, ion storm, or it was simply left there as a trap to try and get 7 back into the collective, because 7 detects a sort of resonance signal from it that she finds very familiar. Now, she doesn't actually remember getting assimilated until she sees the plaque of the Raven there. And then she starts having these flashbacks while she's with Tuvok. And basically turns back into her younger self because, the whole experience was really terrifying for her. But it's one of these classic examples of a design that they came up with for one episode just as a sort of crashed vessel. But then when it came to do another episode called Dark Frontier, they actually had to produce a working version of the vessel off the back of the original version. So it was kind of 4 decks, various scientific equipment in the sort of the lower section, living quarters on one deck towards the top end. And the interesting thing about it, and just looking at the nacelles there as well, they were sort of mixed between original series movie nacelles and Next Generation lit up nacelles. It's interesting. But from the top, it looks very, very runabouty. That sort of top down look there. So here we've got various sketches of the Raven and so on. And a little bit on the making of the Dark Frontier, with another iteration of the Borg Queen, and Seven, facing a sort of a temptation to go back to the collective. But I remember it being a good episode, actually. I mean, obviously Voyager did a lot of fleshing out of the Borg, and interestingly, her parents actually get assimilated. I mean, to give you a rough overview of the episodes, the Hansons were studying the Borg, and they got sucked through into the Delta Quadrant through a transwarp conduit, but they kept studying them even though they were a hell of a long way from Federation territory. But they developed various means to mask their presence from the Borg. And Voyager actually then uses some of their technology, based on their notes that they retrieved from the Raven, to allow them to go into Borg territory and rescue Seven. Now, again, I would have thought that the Borg would have assimilated and adapted to negate that technology, but anyway. But I like it as a ship design. It's straightforward. It's the right sort of size. It doesn't need to be any bigger than what it is to do exploration. But it's a very sort of logical development of a runabout type approach to life. So I like it from a consistency of design point of view, if nothing else. So here's the actual model. It's quite a nice size, detailed model. I imagine because it's based directly off a CGI model. This is one of those ones that's going to be absolutely sort of bob on. In the magazine, it actually mentions that they were supposed to have a shuttle pod built into it as well, somewhere in the back here, in the sort of rear. There's supposed to be some sort of shuttle pod can come out. Whether that's like a little launch pad for it or something, I don't know, but it's vaguely possible, I suppose. It's one of those. This is one of those plasticky models. There's a little bit of weight to it, but I can tell it's show accurate because there's a picture in the magazine that's got that as a screenshot. So they've not skimped on the detail factor on this one at all, in fairness to them. So it's definitely nicely done, but it does feel like one of the more plasticky Eaglemoss models, unfortunately. But you can see there that the nacelles are kind of quite a sort of bluey colour. And that's very original series movie sort of coloration, but they've got this sort of the red tip. But I like the level of detail that they've got, the nice little sort of red lines there going through the registry. This sort of strange kind of civilian-y sort of non-Starfleet registry basically. But I mean, we do know that there are various civilian ships knocking around. It's not just Starfleet out there. There are a lot of humans flying around in space who are not Starfleet, and sort of people like, you think about people like Vash, for example. She was an explorer doing sort of stuff, pinching artifacts and so on, and she would obviously have needed her own transportation to get about the place. So it makes perfect sense that there would be people who aren't Starfleet out there, and they would need ships from wherever they could get them. So there's the fairly sort of straightforward stand setup. Quite a nice secure stand actually as they go. But overall quite a light model. It doesn't really need a huge amount of support anyway, because it's not got quite as much metal content as some of them have. But it's a nice little ship. I quite like it as a sort of a cross between a starship and a pure runabout shuttle. I mean, I always like the runabouts because they had a bit more about them than the average shuttle. But I think the Raven is a logical expansion of that. So yeah, nice little model. Not one I would have sought out had I not sort of tripped across it in the job lot. But still quite a nice one to have. And it's very, very Voyager-y. So it's an easy one to place in terms of a collection, because it's bang smack in with sort of Voyager continuity, even though the actual ship itself is a lot older than Voyager, of course, because it's been in the Delta Quadrant for a number of years when they find it. So that's it for this one. Do like and subscribe as ever, and I'll see you for another one very shortly. Cheers for now.